Everyone. I'm Coni Meyers, and my next guest is someone that I didn't know it, but she has 23 years of background working with the property management company. So if you're a landlord or you're a tenant or you are an owner of a property that's being ran by a property management company, this conversation is all for you. This is Becky Hertzer. Becky, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Connie.
Now, so in 23 years, you've probably learned a lot about property management and things that can go wrong and disasters and crises. You've probably seen a few of them in your career.
Maybe one or two. some small, some large, but just a few of them here and there.
Well, let's kind of start by talking about what property management people do. Number one, what is their responsibility? And then we'll talk a little bit about what landlords can do, what owners can do of properties, and then what tenants can do to keep themselves protected when there's a disasters or other kinds of crises. Because there's all kinds of crises that can happen when it comes to that
Sure.
the properties. So what is the
Absolutely.
function of a property management company?
That really varies depending on what type of housing situation you are in, whether you are in an apartment complex or in a commercial building, a HOA, or a condo. They vary greatly from each one of those types as to what the property management company's roles and responsibilities are. If you're in a condo or a apartment, then the management company is pretty much responsible for everything nuts and bolts as far as the building goes, making sure that the building is maintained, making sure that the building is up to code, preparing for any kind of emergency that they can think of, and helping drill into the homeowners or into the tenants what those responsibilities are and what those processes and procedures are. But when you're in a commercial building or you're in a HOA versus a condo, then the property management company's role is significantly different because of the situation. When you're in an HOA, then you own your own home, and the property management company is really just taking care of the common elements, whether it's a clubhouse or just the common basins or the streets or something along those lines. And then that's when the homeowner really has to take an active role in preparing for their own disasters.
So if you are a property management company, so let me make sure I understand this. So if you're a property management company, your responsibility is going to be much bigger if it's a condominium or something like that, because or not a condominium, but an apartment complex or a commercial property of some kind. If it's a condominium, then your responsibilities are a little bit less just because the homes are being owned by other people. Do I have that right?
Not quite. The condominium is just like the apartment. The property management company is still responsible for everything at the building, preparing those emergency plans, working with the homeowners to know those emergency evacuation routes, holding fire drills with the homeowners. But it's when you're in a homeowners association, which is different than a condominium association, that's when the property management company has very little responsibility to prepare for emergencies because the homeowners own their own homes. And in that case, the homeowners are responsible for preparing their own emergencies.
Do property management companies that are overseeing or part of an HOA, do they typically try to give information out to the homeowners about what they should be doing as far as disasters or crisis or anything? Do they usually get involved with any of that?
They typically do not, because it's not something that they want to be involved in as far as liability goes, right? Because, one thing in the property management world is once you say it, you own it. So once you touch it, you own it. So as soon as you start telling people what you should be doing, then you own that. So if you're telling a homeowners association what your role is or giving them guidance, then you own that emergency process. And each one is going to be different when you live in a homeowners association because the homes are all different and what people are going to do are different and how they react are going to be different. And you may have a 2-story home or a 3-story home. You may have a 1-story home. You may be applicable to some, but not all, because some people have pools and some people don't. The scenarios range so much, and so that's why, as a property management firm, you stay out of it if you're not responsible for it because you don't want that liability.
That totally makes sense. Totally sense. Okay, so let's talk about the part where they are really involved. How many property management companies take preparedness for disasters seriously?
Not enough. I
Not
can tell
enough.
you that firsthand. I have only worked for a small number of property management companies over my career because I've been long-term employee, but I've worked with, meaning like in conjunction with other companies, a lot, and they do not take it seriously. And our industry specifically, we work with Community Associations Institute, and they have disaster preparedness classes all the time. And you would be astonished at the number of people that come to those classes, both homeowners, board members, and managers from management companies. And they're like, didn't even know I should be doing this. So it's, yeah, right. Like, wow. So it's really something that people, I guess it's one of those things where like they don't want to think about it. They don't want to think that something could happen. So then they don't plan for it. They plan for the landscaper, or they plan for the roof leaks because they know that those are going to happen. And they plan for the carpet replacement because they know that's going to be needed in the hallways. But they don't want to think about the hurricane or the wildfire or the flooding or whatever the case may be, depending on what part of the country you live in. So they don't want to plan for those disasters.
I think in FEMA actually has a term for that. It's called preparedness procrastination. And it's kind of like, it's just like, people don't want to think about writing a will because they have to think about dying.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing when it comes to preparedness. And whether you're talking about a property management company or a homeowner or a business, I think it's all the same amount of fear. It really boils down to fear. The bottom line, though, is if you actually create good preparedness plans, then you create resilience, whether you're throughout the entire network, whether it's for the property management company, for whether it's the owner or the landlord or it's the tenant. You're actually creating resilience that will make it much easier. But people have a hard time getting to that, I think. I think that's a big problem.
One of the things that you should be doing is, once you have your plan in place and you've worked with your local municipality and your fire company and your Red Cross and any other local emergency management places that you have in your town, you want to have fire drills at least annually, if not twice a year. And people as adults don't want to do that. They think, I did that when I was in school. I'm not in high school or elementary school anymore. I don't need a fire drill. But those will be the first people that will run for the front door when something happens. And I have to tell you that most times the front door is not where you want to go. Either that front door is blocked for some reason and you can't get access to it, or maybe the emergency personnel are coming in through that front door and so you can't really access it, or that's not the best option for you to get out of. And they don't even know where those additional emergency access points are. There's always going to be at least one additional emergency access point in every building, but they won't even know where it is because they didn't attend the fire drill. And that's why we try to make them mandatory at least once a year so people know what to do. And we actually like have the fire company come out and you pull the pull and the alarms go off. And some fire companies will even go door to door, knocking on the doors, yelling fire department to make sure people are out. And it may seem silly, but it saves lives.
It absolutely saves lives. Any type of preparedness. So if I am a homeowner and um, and my property management company is coming to me and saying, these are some things you need to think about when it comes to, it's actually the exception to the rule. It's a property management company that's taking its preparedness seriously. What are some of the things that that property management company should be suggesting to the property owners?
One, they want to have a what we call a go bag ready. So you should have a something that houses like a change of clothing, emergency medical information, at least a couple doses of any kind of medication that you have to have that are life sustaining. Any kind of important keepsakes that you just can't live without. I'm not talking about let's get a U-Haul together. This needs to be something that's no larger than a book bag so that you can grab it and go. You also want to know where your emergency exits are, both in your home, whether that's an apartment or a townhome or whatever. You want to know where your emergency exits are in your home. You want to know where the fire extinguishers are. You want to know where the smoke detectors are. You want to know where the fire alarms are, the little boxes that they put in there to tell you that there's a fire. And you want to know where the fire exits are in the building. And you want to know where the fire extinguishers are in the building. You want to also, lastly, want to know how to get out of the building, because if you're in a mid-rise or high rise, people are going to instinctively go for the elevator. And guess what? As soon as that fire pull is pulled, those elevators shut down. And the only people that can turn them back on is either management or the fire company with the fire key. So those elevators stop and you're not going to be able to use them to get down, guys. So you got to make sure you know where those steps are so that you can get down them.
You tell a story about a medicine bottle. Could you share where you put the medicine?
Yeah, sure.
Explain
So
that.
one of the programs that we implemented, oh my gosh, I think it was probably 12 or 15, no, it's gonna be longer than that. Probably about 20 years ago now. It seems so long ago. Was called the Vial of Life. And we don't own it. I don't own it. It's a program that is nationwide. And we started implementing it where I worked, and I've done it both personally and at a professional level. You go and you get a empty medicine vial, probably the larger one if you have it. If you don't have one and you go to your local pharmacy, they will usually just give you one. And you want to print out an emergency contact sheet from the internet. You can get these if you just go to Vial of Life and search that. I'm sure one will come up. But that emergency contact sheet should have your name and any household members' names, any medications that you're on, any health conditions that you have, your blood type, if you have any allergies, and who to contact in case of an emergency. And then you just put like a little sticker or a magnet or something like that on your front door so that first responders know that there's a vial of life, and you stick it in the butter dish in your refrigerator. That's like the common known area to place it into. And if they come to your home for any reason, whether it's like a natural disaster emergency, or even if maybe you had to call, like your neighbor called 911 because they found you passed out on the lawn or something, they see that, they'll go get the information, and it gives the first responders and the doctors and nurses at the hospital such a jump start on treating you versus trying to do a whole workup. They'll know right away if you're on a blood thinner, or if you have a heart condition, or if you're prone to strokes, or whatever the case may be, instead of trying to start from square one.
Well, I just love that idea. That's one of the things we're going to be incorporating into. We're putting together some bags, and that's going to be one of the first things I'm going to talk about is having something like that in it because it's such a valuable tool.
It
So
is. My mom passed away in 2008, and after she passed away, well, before she passed away, I just had the emergency sheet, but after she passed away, we incorporate the vial life for my dad because he lived alone. And the paramedics always, like, when I get to the hospital and meet them there, the doctor or the nurse would hand me this curled up piece of paper, and they're like, here's your dad's information back. It helps so much. And it really does.
I think it's just invaluable. So um, there's a lot of other things that can go wrong in an apartment complex or a condominium or a commercial building has more than one floor. Um, Things like pipes leaking, and those are disasters of their own kind. I mean, not too long ago, my daughter and my son have a successful finishing business, and they were on, I think it was like the 14th floor of a very luxury high end condominiums. And one of their workers accidentally left the water on. And so it went down like 5 floors. And the people don't think about that. So what, I'm sure you've seen stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of prevention, what kind of preparedness can you have for something like that? Any ideas?
Sure, absolutely. Wherever you're living, and it doesn't matter whether you own your home or whether you are renting, the concept is the same. You want to make sure that you know where your water and your gas, if applicable for gas, shutoffs are. Most importantly, those water shutoffs. There's always one underneath your sinks, there's one behind your toilet, and then you have a main water shutoff valve that controls your whole house. If that homeowner knew where that water shutoff valve was, he could have quickly shut off the water, at least to that pipe that burst, if not to his whole unit. And then the water may not have made it down 5 floors. It may have still leaked to the unit down below, but definitely not down 5 floors. So you always want to know where those shut off valves are so that you can take quick preventative measures. Another thing to keep in mind too is that when you have an emergency like that, when you have not so much a water leak like that, but if you have a fire, if you have, something criminal going on, and there's an emergency, because emergency can be a criminal, a disaster can be something criminal, you have a mass shooting or something like that. Please don't call the management company first. That should not be your first call. Yes, it's okay to call us and let us know. Please call 911 first. I can't tell you how many times people have called us first instead of calling 911. And while we're happy to help in any way, shape, or form we can, Like that's what those first responders are there for. If there's a fire, they need to beat us there, because I'll tell you, well, if we beat them there, we're not coming into the fire to put it out. They are.
No,
So we need
definitely
them
not.
to be there first, you know. So you always want to call 911 first, and then make sure that you call your management company when it is safe to do so. It may not be safe to do so right away, right? Like you may have to call them and then get the hell out of the building. So once you get out of the building, you get to your rendezvous point, then you call. Like it may not be the first thing that you do, and that's okay. I promise you, they'll tell us. The fire department has keys to a Knox box. Most, but not all, mid or high-rise buildings have a Knox box. And so they have keys to the Knox box and can get into the building and get to the areas that they need to get into without us being there. That's what the Knox box is there for. But we should not be your first call when something like that happens. We want to help, absolutely. But if there's a fire, please call the fire department first.
Well, typically you only have a couple minutes to get out anyway. I think the most statistics that I've seen is that 3 minutes or less to get out of a property before the smoke starts taking over. So for people that don't know, what is a Knox box?
Knox box is a metal box, usually about that big, not much larger. It is embedded into the building, whether it's brick or stucco, it doesn't matter. It's embedded into the building, and it has a special lock on it that only the fire department has a key to. So even your management company cannot access that Knox box without the fire department coming out and opening the box for them. It's supposed to be fireproof for so long. And you typically store emergency contact information in there, such as like for your management company, your maintenance tech, something along those lines, any kind of master keys that you may have for the building, things along, water, where the location of shutoffs for gas, electric, water, so on and so forth, so that you kind of give the fire department a heads up when you think about how many buildings that they are responsible for throughout the city. So if you can help them help you, that's even better.
So when it comes to tenants, what kind of responsibility does the property management company have, and what kind of responsibility does the landlord have in informing tenants of what they should be doing or not doing? Is there any kind of, I know for protection purposes and liability purposes that you can go a long ways in helping to protect your property, but is there any kind of criteria or things that landlords should be and property management companies should be telling the tenants?
So they should be giving them a booklet, or it doesn't have to be something fancy like a true bound booklet, but even if it's something that's printed from a Word document or an Excel document or whatever, like some kind of directions and instructions. Look, this is what our fire suppression system does. These are the emergency exits. This is what your responsibility is. This is who you call if you have this. This is who you call if you have that. And then tell them that you're going to do annual fire drills. Make sure that you do those drills. It's funny what people forget, or how they don't think is what I should say, when an emergency situation is going on. I actually had a homeowner in a garage, it was an underground garage, who, like, there was an emergency situation, we were evacuating the building, and they wanted to leave in their car. And I'm like, no, you could just get out of the building. You can't leave in your car. Like, and they it just wasn't comprehending. Like people, and it's no fault of their own. It's just the way our brain works, right? Like most people in an emergency situation they're just panicked. And you have to have someone there on site, at least one person, if not multiple, that is calm, cool, and collected, that can help everyone else in doing what they need to do, getting out of the building, getting to the rendezvous point, being accounted for, helping the first responders, helping the restoration company, whatever needs to be done. But you need that calm, cool, collected person, because if they see you calm, then they're more apt to being calm. But if you are a mess, they're going to be a mess.
That's why preparedness is so important, because when you are prepared, instead of having a panic attack, you actually know what you're going to do, and you're going to grab whatever your bag and you're going to get out, or whatever the appropriate response is. So really, I mean, one of the most important things when it comes to preparedness is it does create a mindset where you respond like first responders. I have a really good story about that. So I did a panel for the California Association of Realtors, and on the panel was the gentleman who oversees. He's been a fireman and he was a fire chief. He'd been in the fire department for over 28 years. And when they had the fires going through San Fernando Valley, his home was in Woodland Hills, and he was out in that area because he was working with the firemen, everything out there. And all of a sudden, he realized that the fire was headed to his house. And he said he had to work hard to keep his mindset from going like everybody else's does, even with all the training and everything that he had. So when you're talking about the drills and the practices, that's what puts it all together so that you don't have to think, you just respond to what you need to do. And I truly believe that preparedness really gets us there. And if we could all just learn to be a little more prepared. 61% of Americans believe that they're going to be affected by a disaster over the next 3 to 5 years.
And
Depending
I
on
can
what you're
believe that
talking about,
statistic.
15 to 35% are somewhat prepared. Of those 35%, I'll bet you there are only about 10% of those that are 100% prepared. I mean, the numbers are very small. And so we have a long ways to go. And I'm sure that um, I, I think a real benefit to a property management firm, if they are trying to attract new clients, new landlords, quality tenants, one of the best things they could do is offer preparedness training, because that's going to make them stand out against other property management companies that maybe are not doing that kind of service. But they're going to be pulling together then people that are going to be good landlords or good property owners, are going to be drawing good tenants to that building because you're educating them. So there's just going to be this natural draw of a higher caliber of people moving into those properties.
Absolutely. The couple things that we always do is we make sure that when we have our plan, like the one that the management company follows, is that we have the paper version in multiple places, right? So we have it like in our office, and then we have a copy with us at home. I won't say that we carry it around with us, don't get me wrong, but you have it in multiple places. And secondly, you have it in multiple forms. You have it in paper, and then you have it electronically, because when disaster strikes, one, you never know where you're going to be. Okay, I promise you, disaster does not strike on a Tuesday afternoon at 2 o'clock. It strikes on a Saturday morning at 1 a.m. Okay, so you're not at your office, so you need to have that. And it strikes when things strike, like right now, as a matter of fact, we have a horrible storm going on outside right now. It's very possible we could lose power tonight. If I don't have my disaster plans in electronic form, I'm sorry, in paper form, I may not be able to access them on my computer because I won't have power. So you got to have them in multiple forms and in multiple locations. And your homeowner should too. Like, they should know that as well. I mean, everybody nowadays has a Google Drive. Drop them in the Google Drive. Print them
Right.
out and keep them in your car if you don't want to keep them, at the house. Keep them in your car, like whatever. It doesn't matter, but make sure you have them in multiple forms and in multiple places.
I think that's excellent, excellent advice. Well, Becky, I can't tell you what great information that you've given out, and you can tell that you've been at it for 23 years because of your wealth of knowledge. So I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this, because I think it's maybe a little bit of a topic that maybe isn't talked about enough. I know I was a renter for years, and I rented through property management companies. And never once did somebody come to me and say, "Hey, this is what you need to do if something happens." So, and it doesn't have to be a natural disaster. I mean, but
No.
there's all kinds of man-made disasters. Well, let's not talk about the pandemic, but we have mass shootings, we have power outages, we have gas leaks, we have water leaks, we have all kinds of stuff, and everything we've talked about applies to all of the above. So I really think it's an opportunity for property management companies, the ones that see this, and the people that are landlords looking for those kind of property management companies, to step up to the plate and say, "Hey, this is something that we really need to step out there and help our community be better and prepared."
Absolutely. And, one final note for property management companies out there: make sure that you have some kind of mass communication tool that does multiple communications, not just a phone call or an email. There's different versions out there. I don't want to name any names or give anybody any props, but there's multiple tools out there. But like those robocalls that you get from the township, that's the one I'm talking about, because you don't need to contact everyone until you do need to contact everyone. And by then it's too late to set something like that up. So when you have one of those systems already in place, then it's literally one phone call or one tap on an app or something along those lines. And you are able to communicate with every one of your homeowners or every one of your tenants by email, by phone, by text, to let them know what is going on, what they need to do, where they need to go, and what the process is. So it really, it's, we talk about disasters, and you mentioned that they don't have to be weather related. I had one in a community one time, and I was trying to get them to we were trying to get them to get our service that does that for them, and they didn't want to hear about it. They just didn't want to hear it. They don't need it. It was a huge community too. They didn't need it. And then literally a few days later, there was a little girl that was abducted from the bus stop as they were getting off the bus, an elementary school child, and the uh, the board president called the manager and said, "You got to call everybody and tell them." And she goes, "There's 1,000 homes in here. I can't call 1,000 people. I'll be here till next week." Luckily they found the little girl. Just a couple hours later, she was dropped off down the
Wow.
street. She was fine.
What a
But
story.
literally the next day, the board signed the contract for the mass communication tool, so that if something like that happened again, then we can get that notice out. So disasters can be in any way, shape, or form. You just don't know when they will come.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, such good advice. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on with me and have this conversation. I can't tell you how much I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. I hope you have a great night.
All right. You too. Take care now.
Thanks.
We'll be back with another conversation shortly. Bye now.